Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it is time to talk about expansion once again. Now this time we are going to be talking about whether or not the TV ratings should determine where the league expands when they decide to expand. Hopefully it's this offseason. Again, it feels like this is something that's a can that keeps getting kicked down the road. We'll have to wait and see if it ends up happening. But of course, during this past week, we ended up getting some more news regarding TV ratings, this time in regards to specific markets across the country. And well, let's just get right into it and whether or not it should determine where the league expands. So this is an article from UFL News Hub. I know I've talked about things before, but this is a very basic article. Mike Mitchell puts out this like almost every single year regarding markets. So the overall ratings, we'll just get right into this. So on the left of your screen, you have the 2022 USFL top 10 TV ratings on both the Fox and NBC outlets. Now, this is the more important one. I couldn't really find 23 info, but this is the more important one because this was just the one league. This wasn't having, two leagues going head to head against each other for a few weeks, kind of messing up everything. And then on the right, you have the 2024 UFL regular season numbers and the 2025 UFL numbers on Fox. Those were Fox numbers, so take it with a slight grain of salt, but they are what they are. Now, when you look at these, I know that, first of all, yes, I know some of these TV ratings are a bit different from, like, the St. Louis Dispatch article. The St. Louis Dispatch article was a paid-for article. It's a bit hard to find all the info of it. This is the more broad information. This is the metro population rather than the specific city kind of thing. Now, overall TV markets. When you look at these, there are two that stick out like a sore thumb in a positive way. New Orleans and Tulsa. Even if you go by both the Fox and NBC 2022 numbers, Tulsa and New Orleans were not only present a little bit, they were up there in every single year that we have on screen. New Orleans was second in both Fox and NBC broadcasts in 2022. They were in the top 10, finished at 5 last year in the USFL, or I guess 2 years ago in the UFL. And then this past season, they finished second above St. Louis, above Louisville, above other big markets. And then Tulsa. Tulsa was third in both markets in the USFL, or both broadcasts in the USFL. 2024, they were 10th. Then this past season, they were 5th overall. That's insanely impressive for both those markets. The fact that they both were that high every single one of these seasons shows that these areas have legit potential for expansion. Now, I'll get to that more in depth in the next part, but of course, we still got to talk about some of the rest of these numbers overall. Now, Ohio is a big one because the initial rumors was that the two favorites at the very beginning of this whole expansion process were Louisville and Columbus. Now, Columbus was in the top 15 one time. That was 2024 when they finished at 15th, barely cracking the list. Now, well, that's not great. It is important to note that Ohio itself has been present in almost all these lists. Dayton ended up getting that tied 8th spot in 2022 on the NBC broadcast. And then this past season, Cincinnati ended up being in the top 14 with their .7 rating. So a place in Ohio has been present every year, but it is not as consistent as those other areas. Now, Louisville. Louisville actually did pretty solid this season compared to last season, mainly because their rating actually stayed roughly the same, .77 to a .8, but this time point ended up putting them at 4th overall, which is very impressive. That was another area that was, potential expansion market. Is it possible those rumors helped that number? I really doubt it, but it is something to note that Louisville was up there twice in a row. Now, they weren't up there in the USFL back in 2022, but it is still a very solid number to see nonetheless. Now, when you look at everything else, there's a lot of not really huge shockers. Certain other places near, like the Battlehawks, like of course at Kansas City being up there, not super shocking. And then some other areas, again, Memphis barely hitting 14th despite being one of the smaller markets in the league, or one of the smallest, I should say, is what it is. You know what I mean? But overall, when you look at these numbers and you compare them to all these 3 seasons, New Orleans sticks out like a sore thumb as well as Tulsa. Now, New Orleans did have a team, but they did not play in New Orleans, right? That was the hub with the USFL. Even in 2023, when they added 2 more hubs that weren't talking about hubs where they hosted a team, they didn't have one. So they lost the Breakers that never even played in New Orleans, yet their TV rating actually increased this past season. Most markets went down. Whereas New Orleans was a 1.06, they actually increased all the way to a 1.4. That is a huge increase to see, especially not even having a team, and it does open the door for potential expansion. And that brings us to the next point, and that is Tulsa and New Orleans as expansion markets. Now, the size of the markets by themselves are good enough, right? They are right around that Memphis, Birmingham sort of number. They're not as great as like Memphis, which is that 1.3 number in terms of the metro population. This isn't the city, this is the metro area. Tulsa is somewhat close to the 1.06 mil, and then New Orleans is at that 966,000. Now, Birmingham, however, is under 1.2. So it's not like these are super small markets. So, these are still solid enough for expansion areas. Now, a big thing to note as well is about the fact they both have another big market that's less than 2 hours away from them. For Tulsa, you have OKC, which again, if you were paying attention on that last part, we're up there this past season in TV ratings, finishing in the top 14. Now, OKC is about an hour and one of them is an hour 20, one's an hour 40. They're both under 2 hours away from each other, and they're both obviously in the same state. So OKC is a pretty big market at a 1.5 million relative to these areas we're talking about. Obviously, it's not as huge as other markets like, the Dallas-Arlington area or Houston, but it's still a pretty solid number. So you have another market that already had good TV ratings. If you add a team in Tulsa, that's going to help not only the Tulsa market in TV ratings, but also OKC. And when it comes to attendance, if you have a high TV rating, it means that more people in that city and metro area know about the team, meaning you're more likely to have people show up. Now, it's not always the case. Of course, Birmingham was a prime example, though I will say that Birmingham still did average close to 10K per game. And if you're Tulsa or New Orleans, if you put a team there that's an okay, mediocre, like 4-6 team, I would imagine they're going to average 10K. Now, New Orleans itself, they're relatively close to Baton Rouge, less than 2 hours away from that area. Now, Baton Rouge is over 800,000. It's just shy of 900,000. Yes, New Orleans has been going down in percentage a bit, which I know I talked about Memphis not being great in a previous video, but you do at least have Baton Rouge going up there. And as for Memphis, of course, we're talking about Knoxville before, and there's Nashville somewhere else as well. But the bottom line is with New Orleans, you do have Baton Rouge nearby. And both these places have solid stadiums. Now, I know there's other stadiums I've talked about, like the Shrine, but in terms of the main ones people talk about, you have two 30K seat stadiums in Tulsa and New Orleans. You have Skelly Field for Tulsa, and you have Yulman Stadium for New Orleans. Now, these are both great areas to have or great stadiums to host a team. They are on the smaller side of college stadiums at being only 30K. Now, it's not, the 20K that a lot of people want to see, but a 30K seat stadium is still a pretty solid size for a UFL team, right? If you average 10K in these stadiums, you're filling a third of it, whereas if you're in a bigger place, it's not as great, right? I know we've talked about before, I know that's why a lot of people do want the Panthers to move out of Ford Field, because Ford Field, even with the great attendance they have, doesn't look all that great with the people that show up, though I still stand by it looks good enough. The fact is, these are small enough stadiums to work for these markets. So you have two smaller stadiums that are in those cities that can work. And again, you're within 2 hours of Knoxville. Not Knoxville. I'm looking at. You're within 2 hours of OKC. You're within 2 hours of Baton Rouge. So you have other markets in the same state which could have people go to it. As I mentioned before, if you're within 3 hours, that's driving distance for a single day. So you have markets there. And again, especially OKC having a good TV rating, you boost the TV rating on that front as well. The most important way to view this is the UFL is a TV first product. Attendance matters, and the higher ups know that. But TV matters more. You already have a good TV rating without a team being there. You add a team there, it's going to boost the TV ratings even more, because people in those cities already know about the league more than a lot of other cities. Hell, judging by TV ratings, look at Memphis versus New Orleans. New Orleans had a significantly better TV rating than Memphis did. They don't even have a team and haven't had one that even had their name since 23, and they never even played in New Orleans, whereas the Showboats have been in Memphis. Well, they were in Memphis in 23, and then since 24 they played in Memphis. Bottom line is, they're both great areas for expansion. This goes back to what I've always said, that New Orleans should be priority number one of teams to be brought back, followed by the Dragons at number 2. Because the Breakers had a massive online following, despite never playing in New Orleans, and it's proven in the TV ratings that they are still up there, being in the top area. But speaking of Seattle, and why I still have them second, is because of how big the market is. This is another one of those areas like Houston, when I talked about my Houston-Memphis relocation video. Houston is a massive market. So is Seattle. The Seattle area is over 4 million population, the metro area, and it's growing. That is a huge area. Now, is it a shame that they're not up there in TV ratings? Yes, especially because we have seen other markets like the Dallas area being in that top 15. Now, with Seattle, in terms of size, it's right there with the Detroit. It's higher than St. Louis by a significant margin. It is a huge area to have a team. And it's one of those where if you get a team in there and you even get just a decent rating, like a 1.0, what it does is gets you a huge amount of people watching the games. Like we talked about in that relocation video from the Pure City TV ratings. Memphis had a higher TV rating than a couple other places, but because of the population of Memphis itself, it actually was worse than other areas in terms of amount of people watching, i.e. the TV ratings, as in the let's say 650,000 people watching. If you're in a big area, you need a lower rating to actually have a big impact, whereas if you're in a small area, you need a bigger one. It's why when you're over 1.0 in those smaller markets, it's a really solid number. Whereas a place like Seattle, even a 0.5 would be pretty damn solid, especially compared to other areas. So even though the TV ratings prove more so that New Orleans should be brought back, don't let it fool you into saying that Seattle shouldn't be brought back. Because the market is still so big that if you add a team there, it's going to be huge. Again, it's a lot like Detroit being up there. Detroit and Dallas being up there in TV ratings at like 0.7s, those 0.7s matter a lot more than some smaller markets, even like at a 1.5, because of just how many people are in that area. So don't take this as like Seattle shouldn't be brought back because of TV ratings. What I'm saying is New Orleans should be brought back, with proof being the TV ratings. Seattle, they still should be brought back. Again, the attendance was not as good as people remember it being in 23, though, as I've mentioned many times before, that's because the scheduling for the Dragons was one of the worst things you'll ever see. If you go back and look at their scheduling in 23, oh my god, it was the single worst scheduled team we've ever seen in this era of spring football. Like, people who complain about the Battlehawks or even the Brahmas this past season, they don't remember the 23 Dragons, how awful their scheduling was. And they still had solid attendance. But overall, Seattle is a team that needs to be brought back. But with these TV ratings, what they show is if you're going to bring back a team, you need to bring back the Breakers. And in terms of an expansion location, the number one place should be Tulsa. Tulsa has been up there in TV ratings for years now, and they're still solid without ever having a team. You have the Oklahoma Outlaws name trademarked already. You can just have that be the team you put in there and put them in, again, Tulsa at Skelly Field, and that would work. You should be getting solid enough attendance. Again, the bottom line is if you get an expansion team, your goal should be trying to get to 10K. Or at the very least, will it do better than Houston? I would imagine when you look at the TV ratings and compare them compared to other cities with TV ratings and population and who shows up to games, it's just a pretty damn good shot that if you put a team in Tulsa, they're going to average more than 7K a game, i.e. more than the Roughnecks. That's despite Houston being in a mega market, which we'll see if it ends up happening. There's a lot of things that has to be done about expansion. There already were talks about the Breakers going to New Orleans, even with the USFL, so we'll see. But overall, that'll do it. This has been Zon Fox. I wanted to make this video because of the fact that these TV ratings are a very, very big tell in regards to how good markets are for potential expansion teams and obviously bringing back old teams. It does show a lot that, Tulsa and just that Oklahoma market and, of course, New Orleans are legitimately great places to have teams go to. When you already have good TV ratings without having a team, you plop a team in there, those TV ratings are just going to get even better and you're going to have solid attendance. It's not a full-blown guarantee, but it's one of those things where if you just put even a little bit of marketing and add the Breakers, there's a good shot they should hit over a 2 rating because they're already having a good rating without even having the Breakers. But we'll have to wait and see about that. Let me know down below what your thoughts are with these TV ratings and if they do prove where should expansion teams be. Let me know down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified about any videos. Again, I make at least 2 videos a week during the UFL offseason. Going to plan to stream probably once or twice a week during the NFL/college football season. I'll have my fantasy football league that I did last year starting up again. I'll have the link posted sometime in July for that, so be on the lookout for that. Think about becoming a community member. We're getting closer and closer to having a 7th team emoji. You get a bunch of benefits, and as always, guys, have a great night.